was at the invitation of Jodi Harpstead. We've had a marvelous relationship. I consider her to be a fabulous leader who's really kind of, in some ways, been on a magic carpet ride. A wonderful upbringing, great education at Michigan State. She found her way to Medtronic during the really early formative years of that marvelous company, a mission-driven organization. She really thrived there. And then, through a story that she'll tell you, ended up at Lutheran Social Service, and the rest is kind of history. It's rewarding to say that we staffed every speaker but one was a woman leader this year. And it's no surprise, thank you, that we chose Jodi Harpstead to be our final speaker. Please join me in welcoming Jodi. Have fun. Thank you.
Good morning. I was chatting earlier before we started with Karen Kozak from Cargill, and we were talking about how Cargill was 150 years old last year. LSS was 150 years old last year, and I found out last year that our two organizations started about 100 miles from each other in southeast Minnesota, northeast Iowa, so that was fun. I enjoy coming to the Good Leadership Breakfast whenever I have a chance. I came in the past for the speakers. I've stayed for the participants. I love hanging out with the people that this breakfast attracts. And it's just fun when you get a chance later to talk at your tables, what kind of positive and people who believe in abundance and sharing and good leadership show up at these breakfasts. So thank you for coming this morning. You're a real gift to each other. I'm not a native Minnesotan. I was born and raised in the Chicago area. I went to high school and college in Michigan. As Paul mentioned, I graduated from Michigan State. Go Spartans. We can talk about basketball after, but we're not talking about football this year. I have my bachelor's and my MBA from MSU. And my husband and I graduated together there in 1980. It wasn't a great time for the auto industry in Michigan, so we subscribed to the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. I came up my spring break and landed a job at Medtronic, having no idea what an extraordinary company I was walking into. I stayed at Medtronic for 23 years, rode that company from 200 million to 6 billion. What a heady time. It was just extraordinary. High margin, exciting business, and high growth. And so many of us had incredible opportunities there for leadership. 9 of the 11 jobs I had didn't exist before I took them. And people would say, well, now we need you to do this. And we'd say, well, what's that? And they said, well, we don't know, figure it out. And so a lot of us had opportunities we would not have had in other companies, might not have at Medtronic today. So it was just an amazing place to be. I went through a succession of sales and marketing positions there, came up through the ranks in marketing, went out to manage the Boston sales force for a while, came back as president of global marketing and U.S. sales for the pacemaker and defibrillator divisions, and was a general manager for a while in another division. So lots of great opportunity, learned a ton, developed a lot of skills, and through the whole thing got to serve that gorgeous mission of Earl Bakken's, that people would live fuller lives through medical technology. In 2000, my father passed away, and that makes a person think about their life. My grandmother had died some years before that at the age of 90, and I was 45. So I was looking at the second half of my life. I had closed, as we used to say in sales, or delivered 96 quarters in a row for the company. And 97 didn't look like it was going to make me a bigger person. So I started looking around to see what else there might be in the world, even though at the time many of my colleagues and I imagined that we would spend our entire lives at Medtronic. Started looking around and didn't want to move. I found out last week at the Minnesota Women's Economic Roundtable, we had a presenter who's a professor at the Carlson School, that I'm a Minnesota data point. My son had started high school and we didn't want to move. So he told us the story. He came here from New York. He studied Minnesota for the last several years, and he wanted to understand our corporate headquarters economy. And he told us how we all know it's hard to get people to move here, but once they do, they won't leave, right? And once they have kids and they're in the schools, they really won't leave. So I was a perfect example of that. And he also talked about how we have a very diverse corporate headquarters economy and how people move from sector to sector and industry to industry, but stay here in Minnesota. So we've developed this amazing sort of management class of people across the state. And I'm exactly one of those. So didn't want to move and started wondering about the possibility. I had a non-compete with the other medical devices companies in town, right? So I started looking at the nonprofit sector. And I was on boards. I'd been doing volunteering. And I thought, what if I gave my gifts to the sector for the last third of my career instead of waiting till I retired and then volunteering? So the first place I went for my informational interviewing, decided to do that for a year, was Lutheran Social Service, where I was a donor. I told my gift officer, sure, I'll write you a check, but I really want a career. So she introduced me to Mark Peterson. We had lunch. We went fishing. And that was great, and I learned that I would be able to shift sectors pretty successfully. There would be opportunities, and that might work nicely, but he didn't have anything open. So continued my informational interviewing. Toward the end of that year of informational interviewing, it was pretty clear to me that there would be something. And I had breakfast with Paul Batz, who was the board chair at the time at LSS. And as we were talking, I was telling him about my journey and my exploration and my consideration of shifting sectors. And Paul said, are you going to quit your job? I said, what? Quit my job before I have another job? Never thought of that. As soon as I said that, I knew I would. So I finished my year of informational interviewing. I gave my notice at Medtronic, and I walked out of there without a job. One of the most powerful days of my life. And I spent some time really being with Jodi Harpstead, human being, instead of Jodi Harpstead, Medtronic executive, who I had defined myself as for 23 years. And that was really powerful. Decided to take a year off. Mark called me actually before I walked out the door at Medtronic, said, my fundraiser left, why don't you come over now, let's talk. And I said, no, now I'm taking a year off, call me in a year. He says, well, it's now. So we dinked around for 2.5 months, and I started at Lutheran Social Service of Minnesota. So who is that, by the way, Lutheran Social Service of Minnesota? We are your oldest nonprofit human service organization in the state of Minnesota. Again, started 150 years ago by Pastor Eric Norelius near Red Wing, who heard about 4 orphan children up in St. Paul. He hitched up his blind horse, which was a gift from the congregation, went to St. Paul, picked up those kids and asked his congregation to care for them. They fitted out the one-room basement of their church and started the Lutheran Children's Home down there, which merger after merger later in 1963 became Lutheran Social Service of Minnesota. We're not the largest nonprofit human service organization in the state. We're the third. In case you're wondering, the Twin Cities YMCAs and Second Harvest Heartland are the 2 that are larger than us. But we serve in all 87 counties of the state. We serve 1 in every 65 Minnesotans in some way every year through 23 different lines of service. We do everything from adoption to older adult services. Our largest service are services for people with developmental disabilities. And again, 23 different things. Focus has never been our forte. Which is also true for Lutheran Social Service of North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, and the rest. We came out of the church, so if there was a need, we met it. We didn't start in one space and just get really good at that. We have this array of things. And one of the things we offer to the state of Minnesota is if there wasn't a Lutheran Social Service, there would be 23 other nonprofits with 23 CEOs and 23 CFOs and 23 boards and 23 offices. And so we're able to very efficiently manage lots of things. So focus, not the forte. Compassion is our forte. Competence is our forte. And then the efficient use of resources is one of the things that we're really known for. I discovered that you can transfer from sales to fundraising pretty nicely. The skills are very similar. And so I did that. I started in fundraising and raised the money to build the Center for Changing Lives in South Minneapolis, where we have our Children, Youth, and Family Services and Messiah Lutheran Church in the same building, collaborating and working together. We now also, we've expanded in recent years. We have 3 nonprofits run by African Americans. We recently had a Somali-owned and operated child care center. and everyone gets along, and it all works, and it's a gorgeous, gorgeous place. After 3 years in fundraising, I became the chief operating officer and discovered that my operational experience from the for-profit sector was also very useful at Lutheran Social Service. And 5 years ago, the board elected me CEO, while Jim was the board chair. So I appreciate that. People ask a lot about my transition from for-profit to nonprofit. They're curious about that. And they ask about what was different. And what I have said over and over is what was most striking is how different it wasn't. People are people, organizations are organizations. People react to change in the same ways. Of course, I was at a large company. I went to a large nonprofit on purpose. A smaller nonprofit might have felt very different. But that was my experience. So what's my particular secret sauce in leadership? Years ago, almost 20 years ago now, I was sitting at my desk at Medtronic. It was a tough quarter. And I got a cold call from someone who said, we're a consulting firm that specializes in breakthrough thinking. I said, well, bring it on. And someone flew out to Minnesota to meet me from their headquarters in Pennsylvania. She became my executive coach, which she's been for 20 years. She's my coach for life. That's their commitment. And I started hanging out with the folks at Gap International, again, boutique consulting firm from Springfield, Pennsylvania. They don't sell baby clothes. They do extraordinary thinking. Their main pedagogy, the way they operate and the way they work, is to think that your current thinking brings you your current result. And it takes extraordinary thinking to bring extraordinary result. And then they go to work on how you're thinking. That's a very short way to say it. After a couple $1 million gigs with them at Medtronic, where they came in and coached all of my staff and sat in on our staff meetings and helped us really to think the extraordinary, we were able to bring the same thought process to Lutheran Social Service. Back at Medtronic, at one time, we were running a $1 billion business, and I remember the quarter we ended $40 million over plan in one quarter from our breakthrough work. We set a goal that year to make plan in every business, which we'd never done. We'd win a few, lose a few, some up, some down, but that year we made plan in every business. And I had such a high performance team at the time that after we started making these business goals, people started coming in and making their breakthrough goals, losing weight, taking guitar lessons, spending more time with their family, and integrating the thought into their personal lives as well. It was from that work that I discovered that I get a lot of juice out of watching people discover that they're greater than they thought they could be. Inviting people into setting breakthrough goals and then watching them achieve them is the great joy of my life. So at Lutheran Social Service, after a couple $1 million gigs with Gap International, you get on their friends and family list. And we were able to go out there on a weekend, a 3-day weekend, and it's the weekends where they kind of hone their skills and train their new consultants to teach their work. And so Mark and I went out for a weekend to see what they had to offer. And we came back and decided to start breakthrough work at Lutheran Social Service. So we gathered our 90 senior leaders and asked them to set a breakthrough goal for 60 days. Just try it. Personal life, professional life, whatever, just try it. And then after that, how'd it go? What'd you learn? What do you think? We just had our senior leadership forum last week at our camp in Brainerd. And our senior leaders stood up and declared their 2017 breakthrough goals to each other. And then at the end, a year later, so at the beginning of the same meeting, they stood up and accounted for their breakthrough goals from 2016. Did you do it? Yes or no? And if not, what did get done? And it's amazing what's gotten done. A breakthrough goal is a goal you don't know how to do. You don't think you can do it. But if you did, it would make a big difference in what you're committed to. So our breakthrough goals are above and beyond our performance goals. They're not in anyone's performance review. It's just a game we play up here above the normal operating processes. A breakthrough goal is often that thing in the back of your head that if you really had the opportunity, it's what you'd really want to do. If you could get yourself up over the whirlwind. Have you read The 4 Disciplines of Execution? The whirlwind that's around us all day, the emails and the meetings and all of that, and really get at. And so we ask people to say it out loud, to write it down, to declare it to their peers. And then I spend time during the year on email coaching all of those 90 leaders on how's it going, what's up, what are you thinking, what's in the way, what are you doing about it. Since we started working this way in about 9 years ago, we've nearly doubled Lutheran social service. All of our services right now are virtually sustainable, either through government contract, client fee, or fundraising. We've made our budget for the last 8 years in a row, increased our cash, and achieved our 5-year plan metrics. But what's really happened is when 70 of 90 senior leaders achieve breakthrough goals at LSS, great things happen for people across Minnesota in all kinds of ways. We've started the first accountable care organization in the nation that we can find that does not include a health plan or a health system. It's community organizations who do residential and employment services for people with disabilities. And we help people to live beautiful lives at a lower cost, and we're helping the state save money on the Medicaid budget, not Medicare. We had a story just last week of a fellow who came out of the Anoka Regional Treatment Hospital, had such intense mental health issues that we had to put 2 people on one person living in his own home. But after 45 days, he'd settled into the community, he'd relaxed, he'd gotten stable, he went fishing, loved that part. He learned how to cook that fish. He took a job as a cook in a local restaurant, and we were able to reduce the 2 people on one to 1 person on one, and now he's stable in the community, and we call it twice the life for half the cost, and that's how that's going. We've been doing Senior Companions. That's a volunteer service where volunteer older adults call on other older adults to help them stay in their own homes and out of the hospital and out of the nursing home for the last 40 years. It's a program that's been going on since Johnson's War on Poverty. And this last summer, we documented the health outcomes of our volunteer Senior Companions for the first time in the 40-year history of Senior Companions. That all came out of our breakthrough work. Prince of Peace, Burnsville Lutheran Church is in the house. They're now recruiting Senior Companions at their Lutheran church who are doing work to help us help the patients of Fairview Ridges Hospital across the street stay out of the hospital. A few years ago, one of our breakthroughs was to write 9 federal grants at the same time. No one does that for our homeless youth services. We had an array of homeless youth services in St. Paul and in Duluth, but after we wrote those 9 federal grants, we got them all, and we expanded our youth services to 8 communities in Minnesota. So we're pretty excited about that. Last year, we were granted money by the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, and we finished a successful capital campaign, and now we're building the Center for Changing Lives in Duluth for homeless youth, bringing all of our services together in one place and adding 10 affordable apartments for people who finish our services to have an affordable place to live. One of the most exciting developments for me is 2 weeks ago we had training for host homes for youth in Duluth, where homeless youth will be able to live in someone's home while LSS does their case management and helps them get a foothold on their own in adult life. And so now we're setting a breakthrough goal to end homelessness for youth in Duluth, Minnesota. And if we can figure out how to do that, we can take our learnings, thank you. We can take our learnings to the rest of the state, so we're excited about that. Another thing we've been doing quite a bit of is collaboration and partnership. You hear a lot today that the main leaders are doing collaboration and partnerships. So we went to the state a few years ago with all the youth serving providers in Minnesota and got the Homeless Youth Act passed in Minnesota. So there's now $10 to $12 million a year that can get spent for homeless youth that wasn't the case before. I was telling my good friend David Teedy, former president of Luther Seminary recently, that we've kind of got the place running like a Swiss watch right now, and there are days when I'm looking for something to do. And he says, then you're in a mature presidency. What are you going to do with that? Oh, that's interesting. So we've been spending time working on our new commitment to racial equity. We just launched a new study called And Who Is My Neighbor? To get Lutheran congregations talking about race at church. It follows on a study we did last year called My Neighbor is Muslim, a request of the Lutheran pastors in St. Cloud, Minnesota, which went to all the Lutheran pastors in Minnesota, all the Lutheran bishops in the United States, and one major corporation in Saudi Arabia to help Christians and Muslims learn to work together well. My move to nonprofit, as I mentioned, was cheered on by Paul Bott. So let's talk a bit about this good leadership enterprise thing. First of all, you've heard that the book, What Really Works, Blending the 7 F's, was conceived on a golf course at one of our board meetings. My predecessor and I are both in it. Mark's in the chapter on future. I'm in the chapter on fun. I don't know if that means anything. We could talk about that. The 7 F's has become the centerpiece of what we call our Alive Workplace initiative, where we're working to help people blend their whole selves into their work and to have an alive workplace to work in. Also, the Goodness Pledge, some of you have seen that. It's in my office right next to my desk where I sit. And I also have a medallion, a little coin, on the counter in my bathroom where I get ready in the morning, and it says, "What is possible?" Also from Good Leadership. And so every morning as I'm getting ready, I have to ask myself, what is possible today? And I was just pulling out the Goodness Pledge the other day thinking, let's just stop for a minute, all of us. Maybe close your eyes, just take a moment, take a deep breath, and imagine what it would be like if every American read this Goodness Pledge out loud on Inauguration Day in January. It says, "The world needs me to be a good leader who radiates goodness today. I choose to be happy because what we concentrate on grows. I will blend the 7 F's into my work so I can live with less stress and lead with less fear. I will role model rewarding excellence, living generously, promoting fairness, and spreading positivity. And I promise to build on the goodness in others so we can all thrive." What would be possible if every American said that to each other this year? What would be possible if everyone in this room took the pledge? Thank you for your time. It's great to be with you this morning.
Thank you. So, I told you, right? What I want to know, what I want you to discuss at your table, if you will, please talk to each other about what's the first thing that went through your mind when you heard her talk about breakthrough thinking. Breakthrough thinking is that things that you don't even know how you can get it done, but you're going to try anyway. So what went through your mind when you heard her describe breakthrough thinking? Ready, set, go. Hello again. Here I am with our friend Jodi. I love doing the interview, and Jodi and I have known each other for a long time, and so we're just going to get into it. Jodi, we did write about you in the book.
Yes.
It is in the fun chapter.
Right.
And we talked about this trout stream.
Yep.
So please tell us about the farm, the trout stream, and how that adds value to your life right now as a CEO.
Sure. How many of you know about the driftless zone? The driftless zone. It's the place on the Mississippi that the glacier missed. It's a corner of Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa. And while everyone else in the Twin Cities on Friday in the summer heads north, we head south. We have a property on a trout stream in northeast Iowa. And long story as to how we got there, but there we are. And it's an old farm, and we've been renovating the cabin, the farmhouse that's there, a small hut. And then last year we wrapped the corn crib with fiberglass and put a floor in it. We have a bed upstairs and a futon downstairs, and now we're working on the barn. And so we have 15, 16 friends who come down twice a year to go fly fishing with us. It's usually on an art tour weekend in that area. We do that too and have a wonderful time. So it's a great getaway. There's no internet connection there and no email. I love that part. And that's a place for us to get away and recharge. And we love how we're restoring the farm. That's been a real adventure also.
That's fun to hear about. I also want to hear about how being a grandma has changed your life.
Oh, have I shown you the pictures?
Oh, there you go. Here we go.
Yeah, we have a grandson. He lives in New York in Westchester County, and we just saw him last week at my son's wedding. And it's everything everyone said it would be. it's just been a blast. We expect one Instagram photo a day, and now we're getting Instagram video, which is very cool.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we stay as connected as we can and get together as often as possible. But just extraordinary, this grandparent relationship with babies that is just beyond imagining. It's wonderful.
Well, there are some people in this room that can imagine it. I'm not ready to imagine it yet. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's talk about fitness.
Okay.
You and I have known each other a long time, and you've had a fitness revolution in order to get ready for the first wedding in your life.
I had to do it all over again for the second wedding.
So how do you work fitness into this life?
Yeah, it's not easy, is it, when we're running around busy and there's so many temptations. So here's a plug I didn't expect to put in, but I've been working with Slimgenics this year, as I did before my daughter's wedding. And I got down to a size 8 dress twice. I told several people at the wedding that now that my 2 kids are married, I don't know if there'll ever be a need for me to get into a size 8 dress. So I'm not sure what'll happen next, but that was mostly paying a lot of attention to fruits and vegetables and protein and portion control and all of that. I've just started going back to my treadmill routine, and I also have a morning meditation routine that I have been very faithful to in the last couple of weeks because it's taken everything to remain centered and grounded.
Well, let's talk about that. So the mission at LSS is so powerful. How is your faith alive in your work?
Yeah, well, the mission is to express the love of Christ for all people through service that inspires hope, changes lives, and builds community. So faith is built totally into the mission. We are a social ministry of the Lutheran Church in Minnesota. 80% of our revenue comes from government contracts, so we're very public as well. So we really have one foot in the church and one foot in the public square. And it really works quite beautifully. There's never a conflict with that. It just moves smoothly. It's great. And so in difficult times like the last couple of years, with our country so divided, it's been marvelous to be able to turn to our faith and to find great support there and to find inspiration from our faith. Because in the end, we believe there's something bigger than all of the political parties and all of the human contraptions. We also have to be totally open to the people in our organization who don't have to be Lutheran or Christian or have any faith at all to work with us. And so we're working to stay open and flexible and inclusive. But we do have these basic tenets to turn to that are really wonderful in the work.
I think it would be irresponsible of me not to ask you, what is your breakthrough goal now?
There you go. Well, I have 2 right now.
Okay.
My official breakthrough goal that I declared to our team at our management meeting last week is that all of them will achieve their breakthrough goal. Okay. So I mentioned that I do coaching by email with our 90 senior leaders. So about once a quarter, I'll say, how's it going? They'll report in. We'll talk about what's in the way. How are you thinking? Extraordinary or current, to get you to your breakthrough goal. And so my goal is that they all achieve their breakthrough. I haven't achieved that yet.
Okay.
All 90 people achieving their breakthrough goal. But a lot gets done when I decide that that's my purpose. But last week I also shared that I have a personal breakthrough goal that I picked up just in the last few weeks. And that is to learn to be with anyone or anything, and to be able to hear anyone or anything in a way that doesn't take away my personal power, my values, or my call to this mission. And I think it's really important right now that leaders learn to be with people who think differently than they do, because there's such a division in our country, and the more we can learn to listen to each other and be with people who think differently, we're going to be able to come back together.
Really important right now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank
We're
you.
really blessed by your presence.
Thank you.